Hello everyone, I hope you're keeping well, and today I wanted to speak a little bit about the Swansea game. Specifically, what Luton did really well in the first half to allow them to dominate and go 3 goals up, and then what happened, the changes that occurred at half time and throughout the second half that allowed Swansea to dominate and get 3 goals back. Now, this was a game with a lot of moving parts, a lot of changes from both managers at half time, throughout the second half, in the first half even. So I just wanted to go through that, and there was a lot of detail that I found really interesting. So just to start with, we'll look at how both teams set up. So Luton set up with a back three with two wing backs, two kind of semi-holding midfielders in Henry Lansbury and Pelly Ruddock. Luke Berry is a number 10, Elijah Adebayo and Harry Cornick up front. And Swansea set up pretty, also with a back three. They had two holders in Flynn Downes and Matt Grimes, the wing-backs Ethan Laird and Ryan Manning. But the main difference for them was they had two kind of floaters between the lines. They had Liam Walsh and Jamie Patterson, kind of like two Luke Berries, if you like, with only one striker then, with Michael Obafemi up front in his own. And there were a lot of things that Luton did really well in the first half that allowed them to control the game. Or not control the game, but to stifle Swansea. And the first one was the way that they pressed from the front. The intelligence and the intensity of what they did in the first half was fantastic. And as we can see here in this screen grab here, Flynn Downes is being marked by Pelly Ruddock and Matt Grimes is being marked by Luke Berry. And that's making sure that they can't just receive the ball, turn and play forward passes, that we're trying to make them play long. We're trying to make sure that those two can't dictate, can't control, can't progress. And we completely stifle those two in the first half. The second thing to notice as well is the way we stop them from switching the play. So now Harry Cornick is over here. He's making sure that Kyle Norton, who's playing in the middle of the back three, can't just play this pass that goes to Ryan Bennett over there. That Swansea can't just play around Luton's press. They have to go through it, over it, or they have to force this. They have to play that pass into Reece Williams, and then Elijah Adebayo comes across, and Luke Berry comes across, and Pelly Ruddock comes across. So they're essentially trying to make them play there, or they're trying to make them play this one here. And that's what they did really well. The intensity of what they did, and the intelligence as well, which is even more important. Well, they're both quite important, but in the intelligence of the press was really, really, really strong. And we can see here as well, if we just move on. Exactly that from that last picture there, Carl Norton has been forced to play over to try and beat Luton's press. But the important thing from this image here is Cal Naismith and Liam Walsh, because this is another thing that Luton did really well in the first half, was their wide centre back stepping onto Liam Walsh and Jamie Patterson, who's just at the bottom of the screen there. Because if Pelly Ruddock's on Flynn Downes, if Luke Berry is Matt Grimes is over here now. He's over there now. He's just out of shot. So he's dropped onto him. Henry Lansbury will have one more. It's really important then that the wide centre-backs in Cal Naismith and Tom Lockyer then step up onto Liam Walsh and they step up onto Jamie Patterson. Because if this passes on into Liam Walsh, he turns and he runs forward and progresses. But Cal Naismith is being really aggressive and make sure that he can't receive it when he drops to get the ball. Here's another example of Luton's forward press. So there's Pelly Ruddock and Panzu on Flynn Downes. There's Luke Berry on Matt Grimes, making sure those two can't get the ball. And then Elijah Adebayo stopping the switch of play, so Swansea can't play around. And then Luton are forcing them to play here, where they feel like they can win the ball, or Harry Cornick's blocking off, or at other points play into there, and then Luton can just do that and shuffle across and force them up the pitch. Just another example of the wide centre-backs as well. Here's Tom Lockyer this time doing it on Jamie Patterson, stepping up really high to make sure that when that pass goes into there, Jamie Patterson cannot receive and turn and play forwards, that he is being stopped from doing that. And all of these things contribute to Luton basically just stopping Swansea from getting the ball in any kind of dangerous areas. They had the ball a lot around the back, but that's fine because they're not dangerous there. And Luton either forced them long or forced them sideways. And it was really, really, really a really superb first half performance from Luton. And when Luton had the ball, they were good with it. They played positive passes, they got it up the pitch. All the things we come to expect from a Nathan Jones team. But then the second half happened. And just to kind of demonstrate how Swansea were, how much more dominant they were, here's a really, really good passing map made by at Insight Market, so give them a follow on Twitter. This one on the left is from the first half, and you can see how close together all the Swansea players are. There's no height, there's no one affecting the game up here. It's all very, very deep, and that's because Luton stifled them and pressed them in the right areas with really great triggers and intelligence to make sure that they couldn't progress the ball. However, in the second half here on the right, in this right pass map, it's a completely different story. You see Ethan Laird really high. You see Michael Obafemi much higher. Joel Piraway came off the bench. We'll speak about that in a second. But Swansea were able to dominate the game a lot more, threaten a lot more, play much higher up the pitch. So what happened? What happened at half-time that changed that? So Swansea made some changes at half-time as expected when they were 3-0 down. So first of all, they took off Flynn Downs, who was their second holding midfielder alongside Matt Grimes, and they brought on Joel Piraway, a striker. They also brought on Encham for Liam Walsh as another central midfielder, and then just a straight swap, Reece Williams for Ben Cabango at left centre-back. And the first really important thing here is Ryan Bennett, the right centre-back. You'd expect it to be Obafemi or Piraway. Piraway was very important, but just first of all, Ryan Bennett here, and purposely I put him in this kind of position really wide as the right centre-back of a 3. Now in the second half, he was asked to play a lot higher up the pitch. And essentially what this did was force Luton to change, because now Swansea was switching the play out to Ryan Bennett, and that meant that Pelly Ruddock had to start a lot wider, because otherwise then Gabi Osho is 2v1 with Ryan Bennett and Ethan Laird there. So Pelly Ruddock and Panzu has to slide across. And this led to Luton's first change of the match, really. In the 53rd minute, they slightly tweaked the system. They moved Luke Berry from his number 10 role, where usually in the first half he was right on Matt Grimes, making sure that he couldn't receive the ball, turn and play forwards. They dropped him to the right of central midfield 3, so that Pelly Ruddock could start slightly wider and make sure that he was getting across out here. Because if Luke Berry's on there, then Lansbury has to come across and Pelly Ruddock has to come across, and that then left way too much space for these two. So that was the first change that occurred, and you can see it in this next slide here. Ryan Bennett is the right centre back. Pelly Ruddock's had to slide across, so then Lansbury has to come across, and then that leaves a gap here that Jordan Clark or Luke Berry filled. And what effect did this have? Because obviously now Luke Berry, who in the first half was doing so well on Matt Grimes, Pelly Ruddock right up on Flynn Downs, now Matt Grimes obviously isn't being marked by Luke Berry. So what effect did it have? And essentially, this isn't Matt Grimes, but that's the position that he was in all half, was that Matt Grimes had all the space in the world to receive the ball and dictate and play that pass in there and play that pass in there, which is a big change from the first half, because in the first half Luke Berry was right up on the holding midfielder, making sure he couldn't turn and progress. Now Luton have dropped off a little bit and he's on all kinds of space because Pelly Ruddock is worried about this, because they're progressing far too easily down the right. And it's the same thing that happened against Birmingham with Birmingham's left centre back Christian Pedersen. Birmingham were able to play around using their wide centre back, play around the 5-2-1-2 or 3-4-1-2, whatever you want to call it, and this allowed Swansea to just dictate, and allowed Matt Grimes to dictate. Now the second big change, so apart from the Ryan Bennett change, which forced us to spread our midfield and gave space to Matt Grimes, the second important change, as mentioned earlier, was Joel Piraway. Now bringing on Joel Piraway meant that Luton's wide centre-backs couldn't step up and be as aggressive as they were in the first half. Now in the first half, if you remember, Cal Naismith stepping really aggressively on Liam Walsh, Tom Lockyer stepping really aggressively on Jamie Patterson, making sure they can't receive it between the lines and turn. The effect of bringing on Joel Piraway was seen in Swansea's first goal of the half. So what happened in that goal was Ryan Bennett receives the ball, Pelly Ruddock steps out, Jordan Clark's actually on Matt Grimes, which was rare in that half, and Elijah Adebayo's just out of shot, he's just behind there. Ryan Bennett finds a really, really good pass that splits the gap and finds Jamie Patterson in there. Now, usually, what would happen in the first half was that when you have a press, when these guys are being really aggressive, when these guys are all being really, really aggressive on and stepping onto them, you need players behind them to support them. And that's what Cal Naismith and Tom Lockyer were doing in the first half. They were stepping on to Swansea, making sure that Patterson and Walsh couldn't receive it between the lines and turn. But what happened once Ryan Bennett played this pass in here was actually Henry Lansbury was left on his own against Jamie Patterson in there and Olivier Ncham in space. Now, why was that? As we can see in this next picture, it's because Cal Naismith is now being pinned by Joel Pirouet, and this is the effect of Swansea bringing on that second striker. Was now the wide centre-back, Cal Naismith in this example, Tom Lockyer at other points, was being pinned by Joel Pirouet. He can't step out and press or close down Ncham in the previous, as shown in the previous image, because otherwise Joel Pirouet has a free run on goal. Now the other player who's just out of shot is Gabby Osho, who's also being pinned back by Ethan Laird, Swansea's right wing back. But that's the second key change of the half for Swansea, bringing on that extra striker to pin back our wide centre backs and then create all this space for Olivier Ncham and Jamie Patterson to run into. The next thing that Luton didn't do well enough in the second half was stopping Swansea from switching the play. So if you remember in the first half, Luton set up with the Berry and Pelly Ruddock and Panzu stepping onto Grimes and Downs, and then the other striker, Cornick or Adebayo, stopping the switch of play and making sure that Swansea couldn't play around the press. They had to go through or to the near side, which Luton didn't mind. But as we can see here, and it happened on a number of occasions through the half, here's Jamie Patterson stepping inside and just switching it far too easily. And that was just Luton not getting out to the ball, but also, so that's from a physical point of view, some physical problems, but also the change to a flat 5-3-2 where Luke Berry wasn't on Matt Grimes allowed Matt Grimes to then switch the play because he had time and space. So then Pelly Ruddock was always worried about what was going on outside of him. And as we can see in the next picture here, so this is Joel Pirouet over here on the edge of the box. Now that's pretty much exactly where he scored his third goal, the equaliser, but this isn't taken from the third goal. This is earlier on in the game. And as we can see here, we've got the effect of Ryan Bennett playing really high and wide. So here's Ryan Bennett, the right centre-back, playing very high. Here's Pelly Ruddock. Now Ryan Bennett has got the ball, found Ethan Laird, who's just come inside there, and he's made an underlapping run and from here, and Pelly Ruddock has followed him. Whether he should do that, not sure. Whether Cal Naismith can come across, not sure. But this is what's happened. Pelly Ruddock has dropped with Ryan Bennett. What that results in is Henry Lansbury having to come across, because Ethan Laird is now coming inside. Now Henry Lansbury comes across, and what this does is then leave space for Joel Pirouet on the edge of the box and Olivier Ncham there. So this wasn't Pirouet's goal, but you can see the makings of it earlier on in the game, where Pelly Ruddock was getting sucked across because of Ryan Bennett. Henry Lansbury then has to come, and that leaves space on the edge of the box for Swansea to get shots away. This also happened in a slightly different way for Swansea's second goal. So another odd thing that happened in the second half for Luton was when Jordan Clark came on, about 5-10 minutes after he came on, it became quite clear that he'd been instructed to stay on Jamie Patterson. So here's Jamie Patterson, Swansea central midfielder, and he's dragged Jordan Clark basically into the back line. So there's Naismith, Burke and Lockyer, and now Jordan Clark's almost playing as an extra centre-back because he's been asked to stay on Jamie Patterson. The other thing in this image was Pelly Ruddock is quite wide because he's obviously worried about what's going on to the right side and making sure that Gabby Osho doesn't get caught 2v1 against Norton or Bennett, as it usually was Bennett. And the end product of that is Henry Lansbury here. Henry Lansbury's left 2v1 in the centre of the pitch, and that allows Ncham to get a shot away. Now, it's a brilliant goal from Ncham, and you wouldn't expect that to go in most of the time. But the reason why Ncham had space on the edge of the box is because Pelly Ruddock's out here. He's thinking about what's going on out there, which is perfectly reasonable. And Jordan Clark, he's been asked to man-mark Jamie Patterson, but he's probably overdone it and gone in here, which has left Lansbury 2v1. And that led to the second goal. So what did Nathan Jones do to address this? Now, at this point, Luton have been dominated for the second half. They're finding it very difficult to get out, to keep the ball. When they do get the ball, they're trying big diagonals and not really falling back on their basic possession structures and trying to keep the ball and just alleviate the pressure. And with the lack of bench options, real physical bench options in Alan Campbell, Admiral Musquet, Fred Onyedinma, that really affects Luton's ability to get up the pitch, to press, to try and wrestle the game back from a physical point of view. So probably quite a sensible call then was to bring on, well, initially Cameron Jerome came on and went to left midfield with Elijah Adebayo. But then, of course, Glenn Ray came on and Pelly Ruddock went to the left with Cameron Jerome up front. And, you could say that's a negative change. But actually, I think in terms of the state of the game at that point, we weren't going to wrestle control back. It was probably too far gone in that sense. So it was just a matter of, can we get bodies behind the ball and defend properly? What this allowed us then was, rather than having a 5-3-2 shape with Pelly Ruddock getting drawn across, then Henry Lansbury getting drawn across, was then we just had an extra midfielder in there so that we could help deal with this, so that Pelly Ruddock could just solely focus on what was going on out of the picture, just over there. And what you would expect in that is then we would try and take advantage of that, not overload, but matching them up a little bit more, having a lot more cover. However, that's not what happened for the third goal, and this is something that I don't know Nathan Jones will be very frustrated about, because this is the build up to Swansea's third goal. Now, as you can see, Gabby Osho for the left wing back has dropped in to kind of play as a centre back. Pelly Ruddock, the left midfielder, is kind of defending there to get to Ethan Laird. But the real key thing here is Glenn Ray. Now, Glenn Ray has come out of there to get on Olivier Ancham. And he's the left central midfielder playing in a midfield 4 now. The result of this, if we move it on there, was that ball went inside and Henry Lansbury has had to come across. Because if Glenn Ray is out there, of course Henry Lansbury has to shuffle across. Now he's probably a touch deep, but he's had to come across because Glenn Ray has been drawn out. And that then leaves all this space on the edge of the box for Joel Pirouet to shoot. And that's kind of the story of the game, really, in terms of the story of the second half was Swansea were able to get the ball up the pitch far too easily. When they did get it around the box, they caused us problems. They pulled our central midfielders out of position and found space on the edge of the box to get shots away. And that's how they scored all 3 of their goals. Patterson, Encham and Pirouet all getting goals from outside the box. Now, I guess the confusing element of this for me is that Luton under Nathan Jones, don't defend the box zonally. Luton defend the box man to man. We used to defend the box only under Graham Jones, and that used to allow little pockets of space to appear. But in the second half against Swansea, we went a lot more zonal. We weren't man orientated. It wasn't Henry Lansbury on Pirouet, and it wasn't one on there, and it wasn't one on there. It was people shifting across in a bit more of a zonal manner that opened up these spaces in here. So, of course, a frustrating game and physical, and you can't deny that physically we were tired after a tough week. But this goal, I just want to emphasise that this goal was not anything to do with people not getting to the ball or being aggressive enough or anything like that. It was people's starting positions. And that, I think, is actually more important when you're defending the box, is having good starting positions. Because Henry Lansbury chucks himself at the ball, but because he's so deep and he's been drawn across, because Glenn Ray has come across, that he just can't get there. And just to kind of illustrate the drop in the intensity of the press, you can see here this graph shows the PPDA score for Luton, and basically what that means is it's a metric that measures a team the intensity and the height of a team's press. Now, so if you have a low PPDA score, then that means you're pressing really high, and if you have a high PPDA score, then your pressing is dropping off a lot more. And as you can see here on this graph, it was at 12 to start with, and then even here at the 30th minute mark, it hit 6.9, which means we were being really aggressive on Swansea and making sure that they couldn't do anything. But then over here, about the 65th minute or so, it dropped all the way to 24. Now that's a big drop, and a very consistent drop in how much we were doing there, which is quite concerning. But I think obviously physical levels had a massive impact on that, with the lack of bench options, with the lack of Musquay, Campbell and Onyedinma off the bench or starting, which then allows others to come on and affect the game. Naturally, that is a huge factor, especially with the kind of physical levels that those guys give you compared to others is very high. But also just in terms of we made very conscious decisions not to step on Grimes and to drop off a bit more. Now I think that a huge factor in that could have just been the fact that physically we were very tired and we didn't feel like we could step onto them. And that's only obviously something that the sports science guys and Nathan Jones and all those guys will have all that information available to them. And obviously they didn't feel like we could continue to go after them in the same way that we did in the first half. So just, it's all well and good me sitting here and saying so and so, we did this, we didn't do this, but what are some solutions? What could we have done that potentially could have negated what Swansea were doing? And again, I don't want this to be a criticism of anyone. You have to, I've thought a lot about this and having pored over the footage in hindsight and all that. Obviously, it's not the same as being on the touchline, having to make split-second decisions. And obviously, I don't have as much access to the information about people's injuries and so on. So, what I thought was, and I was surprised at the time that we didn't do, was switch to kind of a 4-4-1-1 system. Because obviously we were worried about what they were doing to us on this right side with Ryan Bennett stepping high and Ethan Laird. So obviously we always needed two out here to do that. And we could have maybe brought on a Mendes Gomez to do that job. Again, risky bringing on someone like Carlos, who needs a lot of time and physical development before he's ready to play properly in the Championship. So again, that's another decision where there are a lot more factors at play than simply we needed a left midfielder on the pitch. And I also think a big thing that we missed in the second half was that pressure on Matt Grimes on the pivot to stop him from dictating. And that's why I think we needed a number 10. So if we want a left midfielder and a number 10, we could have gone to two banks of four. Now, the big limiting factor on that is Cal Naismith with his injury. And was he able to play left back? Probably, maybe not, because he started left centre back and Gabby Osho started left wing back. Now, obviously, he's physically massively struggling. So I think there are a lot of constraints, and I don't want to criticise or say someone didn't do something properly, because there's a lot of factors at play here, and you have to really, making those kind of decisions on the touchline is very difficult. So overall, Luton did brilliantly in the first half to limit Swansea, to press them, to stop them from playing. In the second half, the physical levels dropped. Luton dropped off them. Whether that was because physically they were too tired or whether that was a conscious decision, I'm not sure. I doubt it was a conscious decision because of how successful they were in the first half with it. And I really think the big factor in this was the injury problems, because if you have Alan Campbell, Admiral Musquay and Fred Onyedinma either starting or on the bench, so others can come off if they start, then that changes the game completely, because you can really try and wrestle control, and that gives you that forward thrust, those forward passes to get territory, because that's what we didn't do in the second half, was get territory. You have those three in and around the matchday squad with others able to come off. You have your Cornicks, your Cornicks, your Musquay or whatever, who can get on the pitch, who can get you territory. So very disappointing to not hold on to a 3-goal lead, because we should hold on to 3-goal leads. But this squad is hungry, it's athletic, it's struggling with injuries at the minute, it's tired. And I think that there are a lot of positive signs going on here, because when you look at the underlying stats in terms of expected goals and for and against, there are a lot of good things going on. And I think we can be really excited about the rest of the season and what this squad and this manager can do with these players. So I hope that was interesting, and I hope that you found that useful. Please give me any feedback on anything that you might have seen that I've missed, and also this format, because I've never done a video on anything before. And thanks for listening.